some, the 50s were a golden age. Public figures were automatically respected. Authority was deferred to inside as well as outside the home, and children grew up with an unquestioning sense of security. For others, they were dull and restrictive, as monochrome as the picture on the nation's television sets. But Britons were undeniably better off, as material prosperity swept away the last vestiges of austerity. Most of our people have never had it so good, declared Harold Macmillan, and on the basis of their own experience, most people believed him. The illustration here is it's a street party to celebrate the coronation of Queen Elizabeth in 1953. And I remember a similar scene in 1977 when I was a child, celebrating the Queen's Silver Jubilee, and communities gathered on trestle tables set out for the children, everyone dressed up in red, white and blue, and everyone brought along sandwiches or cakes and paper cups of squash. But anyway, back to the 50s. So far we have looked at the war years with all the rationing, and here we've got scenes of children barging into a confectionery shop, and the caption is "Joyful free-for-alls followed the lifting of sweet rationing in 1953. The British people had to endure limited food supplies for longer than any Western nation, including the vanquished Germans." But although this picture is taken before I was born, I remember newsagent shops that looked just like this, and jars of sweets in the window, and wooden counters, and shopkeepers that looked just like this gentleman. Yeah, I guess if you've grown up and all you'd ever known was rationing and restriction, it must have been a wonderful day when you could run into a shop and buy as many sweets as you had money for. And we've got here a little illustration helping people understand self-service shopping, because up until this point, people going in to buy groceries would be served by one of the shop assistants, and everything would be brought to the counter. But the first self-service store opened in Croydon in June 1950, and of course such a change meant that people needed to be educated on how you did the self-service. this is an artist's impression of the site, which was on the south bank of the River Thames at London, and on what had been 27 acres of derelict, bomb-scarred land. There now soared the concrete curve of Festival Hall, and it marked the centenary of the Great Exhibition of 1851. The description here is of optimism, a better tomorrow. Everything was bright, shiny and new. The festival offered a fresh vision. Yeah, after years of austerity, this was a beacon of hope, optimism. London was at that time suffering a smog which would descend like a damp and ethereal lava flow, and for days the city was in a poisonous twilight with very poor visibility, and this had a very negative effect, as you can imagine, on people's health. But more positive, looking at crowning achievements. This is the image of Sherpa dancing on Everest, and conquering Everest really thrilled the country, and it was the icing on the coronation cake. And on the day of the coronation, which was June the 2nd, there were two headlines on the front pages of the newspaper. One, obviously, the Queen about to be crowned, but the second one was about Everest being climbed by the British expedition. What a joyful day it must have been. And there is the newspaper after the day of the coronation. And of course this year we've had another coronation. And now we're going to talk about television, because in the decades we've done so far, we've talked a lot about BBC and radio, but the start of the 50s, television was still radio's poor relation. But by 1959, the faces of television personalities were as familiar to many viewers as those of their own families. So in this decade, television really did explode. And in the world of home entertainment, many families, the glowing box, as it's called here, took the place of the glowing hearth as the focus of the home. And the Daily Mirror, a British newspaper, warned in 1950, if you let a TV through your door, life will never be the same. Look at the televisions of the day. I remember having a TV set in the 70s. It was black and white, and you switched it on and then waited a couple of minutes for it to warm up. So we've got various TV programs, shows, do-it-yourself shows, and of course, game shows. And after the BBC, then there was a commercial station, which was the Independent Television, or ITV, as I knew it. And children's TV, look at this television here. I remember watching Bill and Ben. And I think daily there would be a section of the broadcast was dedicated to children, and it was called Watch with Mother. I remember that very well. Now here we're looking at children playing outdoors, often on areas that had been damaged by the bombs of World War II. And the games that were popular: hopscotch, goalposts, playing football using jumpers for goalposts, leapfrog, I suppose images here of an idyllic childhood, children out playing, exploring, building swings, and some of the sweets. I remember this picture of a tube of sweets, boiled sweets, fruit flavoured, called Spangles. I remember Spangles. We've mentioned comics previously, and we've got new ones coming out in this decade. Dandy and Beano, and then specialised comics for girls, and then Eagle for boys. Looking at the domestic life of families, there was a lot of new housing built after the war. Of course, women had got a taste of working away from the kitchen sink, and so there was a revolution in convenience foods, kitchen gadgets, supposedly to help women have an easier life. And you got women out for sweeping and scrubbing the steps. Great deal of pride in maintaining a clean home. And there was also the development of so-called new towns to house people. As I said, after the war there was a huge demand for housing, and then these towns to service the people who lived in the new houses. So examples of new towns: Bracknell and Corby. The houses had modern plumbing and were designed to keep clean air. And in these new homes were these wonderful so-called fitted kitchens. Previously, the old terraced houses, they might have, housewife, the family might have cooked over a range in the room where everyone was. Maybe there would have been an extension with a sink if you were lucky. But these modern homes had purpose just not go down well today. A lovely fitted kitchen with all the appliances. An assumption. Lucky girl. Lucky girls enjoy domestic luxury with a cascade of drawers, built-in cupboards, wipe-clean surfaces, and eye-level shelving. Formica, a colourful and stylish, was the last word in kitchen technology. Modern furnishings from I actually love the 1950s textiles. Here's some example people. My parents, for example, had curtains made in fabrics like this. And I love it because it's quite minimalist and geometric. Do love it. Chairs, really simple lines. And here, look, convenience food in the form of frozen food, fish fingers by bird's eye, and frozen peas. My parents, we had a fridge with a ice box, so we couldn't store much in the way of frozen food, but frozen peas definitely. Now I love this page because the modern housewife in the 1950s had lovely kitchen gadgets, and you might know that I also love my kitchen gadgets now. But this, it's a kitchen mixer, and my mother had this exact one. It's the caption here, typical 50s kitchen, contained a hodgepodge of styles. No frills utilitarian objects such as the coffee machine. Lived alongside food mixers shaped like nuclear warheads or Martian ray guns. And I suppose this is a very futuristic shape, isn't it? And it's made by Sunbeam. It's called a Mix Master. And as I said, my mother had this very one. See, this bowl was glass. And she had two sizes, a small bowl and a much larger bowl. And then these little whisks. And this was the dial that you would use to get the motor going on a slow speed or a much faster speed. And it had an attachment, this little bit you could remove. You'd take the beaters off and then take the bowl away. And there was some kind of metal contraption that fixed on there. And you could add sort of a leftover joint of beef, put it through this grinder, and you'd end up with minced meat. And my mother would make, after a Sunday dinner, maybe on a Monday, the joint remains would go through this grinder, and we would have minced meat with leftover vegetables. But yeah, absolutely, really loved seeing this photograph in this book. Any of you similarly remember in your households such a mixer? gorgeous, gorgeous cloth. And got adverts here for car magazines. So family holidays, day trips became a possibility for those lucky enough to have a car. And this is a lovely advert for Baby Sham. Now I do remember at Christmas my parents would have, or my mother would have, a glass of Baby Sham. Sparkly kind of a berry drink, I think it was. Barely alcoholic fizzy drink in a special glass. It was served in a little champagne coupe with a cherry on a stick. Yes, my parents actually had a cocktail cabinet, only opened at Christmas, and it had a jar of maraschino cherries in there. So Baby Sham with a little cherry on a stick. And the logo for Baby Sham was this beautiful little, I'm not sure if it's a deer, and it had this giant silky bow around his neck. And talking of leisure, the holidays, British families going on holidays, very often to the seaside. Holidays abroad weren't really a thing for your average family. This is a photograph of a archetypal seaside landlady. So families would go and book a room or a few rooms at a seaside guest house. And most people would rather go somewhere to a bed and breakfast with a landlady like this and risk the British weather, which could be variable, but they would rather that than risk crossing the channel. Yeah, most people remained in Britain for holidays. But of course we did have the advent of these holiday camps, and I myself had quite a few childhood holidays at Butlins and Pontins. And I know my parents loved them because myself and my sister were taken care of. We could enjoy ourselves, and my parents could enjoy a bit of child-free time, or at least join with other families who had young children running around. And there were family entertainments, so the whole family could have a lovely, lovely time. So I have fond memories of holiday camps. And the Archers goes on air, the Archers being a radio program, and that is still going today. North Korean forces crossed the 38 parallel into South Korea, precipitating the Korean War. 1951. Films in the cinema. An American in Paris, The African Queen, and Strangers on a Train. 1952. The King George VI dies. Churchill, the Prime Minister, announces that Britain has developed an atomic bomb. 1953. In June, Elizabeth II is crowned. East German workers rise up against Soviet rule. Hundreds die in Berlin as the revolt is suppressed. 1954. The world's first nuclear submarine, the Nautilus, is launched. 1955. April. Winston Churchill resigns and is succeeded as Prime Minister by Anthony Eden. 1956. The films popular at the time: The King and I and My Fair Lady. Absolutely love both, especially My Fair Lady with Audrey Hepburn. Love it. 1957. Another change. Prime Minister. Harold Macmillan becomes Prime Minister after Anthony Eden resigns. 1958. Britain's first parking meters are installed in Mayfair. And 1959. The English Channel is crossed by hovercraft, recently invented by British boat builder Christopher Cockerell. The crossing takes just